There were aspects of these computer-generated images that looked, how should I say, real, non-animated. In other words, they could have been put in a regular feature film with live actors and mixed in with those, and there were machines and solid objects and spaceships and mechanical devices and things that looked absolutely real. And then there were the animated characters within that, and I kept wondering, was it an artistic choice to make the animated characters look sort of halfway between what we consider classic animation and what you could do with computer generated characters, to make sure that we were still in an animated world, that it had those sort of drawn or cartoony, so we weren't mistaking them for real characters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. I mean, basically what you're talking about really is sort of a stylistic choice. Yes. Of the style or the look of the movie itself. Right. So it's a fine line. So, what we found, like with I feel with animation, specifically at DreamWorks, but I think sort of throughout CG animation, is that a lot of the techniques, a lot of the style choices that we were making originally with hand-drawn characters, it doesn't necessarily translate very well into 3D. So when you turn, and I don't mean 3D as in stereo, I mean just 3D CG animation. Right. Because you can manipulate a flat image to make any sort of look will look the right way, because you can manipulate it because it's a guy who's actually drawing it. But when you're in 3D, you're spinning it, you see it from all angles. So you sort of have to bring a little bit of the realism into it, or certainly that's our philosophy, is to bring a little bit of the realism, especially into the human characters, because they need to be relatable, certainly. Right. But as I'm saying, we have to cartoon them, we have to twist it just a bit, because first of all, specifically in Monsters vs. Aliens, there's a lot of destruction, there's a lot of violence, although played in sort of unrealistic, dealing with aliens and things like that, it's still, there's explosions, there's the Golden Gate Bridge gets destroyed, things like that. So you have to be able to tweak it a little bit so you can enjoy it without thinking, oh my God, thousands of people are dying. Yes. So that's the thing, and I think sort of the line that we straddled, because we felt like we really wanted to ground it in a reality. And so what we tried to do overall with the stylization is there's a shape stylization. So for instance, the humans are very long, the heads are larger, the hands and the feet are very long and sort of well defined. And then but the actual texture detail, and this goes across the board with the vehicles and every other environment piece, the texture detail is actually very photoreal. And we thought that was sort of where we were playing, with it. So it would have that, you were grounding in a reality, but it still sort of had a little bit of that whimsy, a little bit of that cartooniness.
Well,
and,
that was the second point I wanted to raise to you that I was fascinated by, and that was the texture details, and especially the way the various textures existed with one another. So what I mean is the way the hair on characters would move and fall and lay against skin and the neck, and especially the way that cloth laid against the body, instead of just being drawn on there with a little shadow or something, there was actually movable space between the way someone's shirt or tie was laying there. It was fascinating.
Yeah, it's actually a whole department. Well, several departments are involved in that process, but we have a department that's called character effects, basically, and what they're in charge of is simulating dynamic clothing. So they get a model that's sort of like the most pressed, clean, non-wrinkled version that you can, and then what they do is they put that on the animated character, and then they simulate that clothing and give it the properties of, say, a cotton shirt, a silk shirt, whatever it is, and that's what gives it that wrinkle, and that's what gives it that flow, and it follows along with the animation. So it is as close, it's a very close approximation to a real garment, if you will. And as far as the hair goes, Susan's hairstyle in particular, it's a lot of people in a lot of departments working on that. There's a simulation written, there are programs written, there are several people in there who are basically styling her hair. And then that same department, the character effects department, actually goes in shot by shot, and they run their simulation to get it to move, and then any sort of what we call interpenetrations, where it sweeps through her ear or it hits the collar of her shirt, they go in and they fix that and tweak it by hand on every shot. Subsequently, that's why you have 300 or so people working on these things.
Yeah, I saw the list of people just listed in animation and just listed in special effects, and it was hundreds of people.
Yep.
And that's why, right?
It's a very exacting thing, and at DreamWorks, one of our goals is to really make a very, very rich looking film. So we don't skimp on details. Those details, and that we feel like that's part of what we bring to the table.
Oh, and it did. I mean, it was fascinating to me, and it also seemed to me that all of you who made this film had tremendous fun in making it. There were so many little details, and I probably have to go back and watch it again to see all of the things that you put in there. But I think I saw a jet or a spaceship fly by that said "E.T. Go Home" on it. Did I see that?
Oh, yeah, there's a missile at the beginning. Yeah, that when they're trying to destroy the robot when the president plays Axel F, and they realize, we're going to have to try to destroy this thing. Yeah, they send the missiles, and it says E.T. Go Home.
E.T. Go Home, and did I hear a little bit of John Williams' theme when that happened?
Yes, the door opens up and everything, yeah. It's one of those things, so, part of Monsters vs. Aliens, there was that sort of feeling of, it's such a rich sort of cultural background, sci-fi, monster movie, those things. So it's nice to play with it a little bit, to tweak it, just a bit, just to have fun with it. And we definitely have fun. I mean, I always say, whenever we're getting stressed out and everything, it's just we're making cartoons. I mean, ultimately we're making cartoons, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be having fun doing it, even though there's a lot of pressure on us. Nobody. It's not a live or die thing, and so you sort of have to use that as your mantra moving forward, so you don't get too crazy with the whole thing.
How did you feel about it all?
It's kind of amazing. I mean, like I said, it's 3.5, 4 years of my life really up there, and I was sort of waiting for that cathartic moment of oh my gosh, here it is, it's done finally, and I definitely had it. I think I felt it more, actually. I went and saw it in the theater with just ordinary people, people who didn't work on the film with me or anything like that, and I went with my wife Nikki, and we were sitting there. My daughter, who's almost 5, she didn't want to see the movie. She's a little too scared of it. So it was just Nikki and myself, and we sat there, and there was a little boy next to Nikki, and he probably maybe 7 years old, and he had the glasses on, and as stuff was coming out of the screen, he was reaching for it, and he was reacting, and was just hearing the crowd, and it was, 3.5, 4 years. I mean, I've seen it, I've heard the jokes, every little minute detail, especially in being in the art department, you sort of it's hard not to watch it and see the history of every little piece. So, but to see it with the audience, and just to hear just a regular audience, and to see this little guy reaching out and stuff and everything, I mean, that was actually when for me it was just wow, this, I felt something for it. I felt I've accomplished something. I mean, that just that this guy's enjoying it, and this guy's captivated by it, which for me it's harder, spending so long with it.
Well, I'm glad that you learned part of that love and some of the skills and talent and technique and inspiration right here at Bradley. I mean, it's such a thrill for me to see you continuing in these great creative ways. I mean, we're so proud of the work that you're doing, and it was an absolute thrill for me to sit there at Monsters versus Aliens and think about the part that you played in it, and it was terrific. So,
Thank you. I'm glad.